Okay, guys, so those were the infamous letters. These letters kind of changed everything, kind of changed the way that I was with my family. It changed my relationships. And my mom didn't know about these letters. She had no idea, and I didn't end up telling her, and you guys will see this in an upcoming episode, that I didn't tell her, and I eventually do tell her. But it was months later. I regret writing them, especially the last one that I wrote to my aunt. And I'll tell you guys why, but let me first explain. I was really angry at that point in time. My mom's sick. She's not doing well. She's getting worse. There was a little period of time where she kind of started to get a little bit better. But, there was still a lot of problems going on medically. Like, she was recovering from her surgery, so she was able to do more herself, and I didn't have to go over there as often. But, she was not getting better medically. She started coughing blood up, and then, there's all these different things started happening. So it was getting scary. Pains weren't going away. She had this pain in her back, and I had just assumed that it came from that thing, the mass that she had. And then when they removed it and a couple of months went by and the pain kept coming back, I realized it wasn't from that. And it was like, okay, something else is going on. And I was kind of in the dark. As you guys can see, my aunt wrote stage 4 cancer in that letter. That's the way I found out. Nobody ever told me that. Nobody had ever told me that they staged my mom's cancer and said that she was in stage 4. That was the first time I had heard of it in this nasty letter. But I was really angry because this was years and years and years of invalidation and, all this crazy shit that was going on in my family. And it just kind of all came out, and I had a lot of anger towards my Aunt Betty because of the passive aggressiveness, her husband unfriending my mom on Facebook and me. My mom would go to her and, me and my Aunt Debbie, we had conversations about how dismissive my Aunt Betty was of my mom's depression. And that's why I was so shocked to see that she was like taking up for her so much, and like she made it about things that it wasn't even about. I'm talking about my mom's depression, and she's like, I don't know why you have to compare lives. And I wasn't doing that. I thought she would kind of understand that it was more geared towards my Aunt Betty. And it seems like she kind of did, because she's sticking up for her so much. But at the same time, I'm like, don't you remember the conversations we had about her? And I just want to tell you guys this. They went around telling everybody in my family that I wrote them this nasty letter. But, and they're talking about the first one, I assume, which wasn't nasty at all. I found this out later, later on. I wasn't writing it to be nasty to them. I was really just desperately seeking help for my mom. I was hoping it would spark something in them to maybe talk to her or come out here. Maybe we could all talk to her, maybe visit her a little bit more. They didn't visit her. They didn't come over. They didn't want to give up their weekends to come hang out with my mom, come over on a Saturday for a couple of hours. I think the whole time my mom was sick, I think my Aunt Debbie came over maybe once, twice. I was kind of trying to get help. And they tell me, oh, if you need help, just ask us. And then I ask you, and this is what happens. You start arguing with me. And, the fact that she got so defensive, it kind of shows me that she had a little bit of a guilty conscience. She's making all these excuses about how she has to take her garbage out, and she works for 12 hours. She doesn't work for 12 hours. First of all, most people have a full-time job or out of their house for 10 to 12 hours a day, if you count commuting and all that other shit. She used to go to work and stay late, and then she would go shopping after work all the time. So it's not like she was working that whole time. That was her excuse. She had to get garbage together. It's just like, how long does it take you to get your garbage together? You have 2 people living in your house. You have a small house with 2 people living in it. Just insane. And you just wait until you see the excuses she makes in the future. But my Aunt Betty, the anger was more directed, I guess, at her. My mom, over this whole time that my mom and my brother weren't talking, and, me and my brother weren't talking, my mom was very upset about it, and she was very vocal about it. And she would get on the phone. They all talk on the phone constantly. And she would be on the phone with my Aunt Betty in the morning or something before work. And then she would call me up and she would be all aggravated and upset. And I'd be like, what's the matter? And she'd be like, oh, I was talking to Aunt Betty this morning and she said this, this, and this. My mom would express to her that she's so sad, that she can't stop crying, that she's so upset that she has to spend Christmas apart and this and that. My aunt would just constantly invalidate her and be like, oh, Carol, just think positively. Oh, Carol, stop worrying about this. I mean, she really got to a point where she made my mom feel like a piece of shit. She would tell my mom things like, I would never get involved in my son's relationship. That's bullshit. Let me tell you guys. She, of anybody, I mean, when my cousin was dating this guy back in the day, I'm not going to say his name, but she was dating this guy when she was young. I mean, she was in like high school. And my aunt had, in her head, had them married. When my cousin broke up with this guy, my aunt made her a CD, like a heartbreak CD, with all these like sad, like Whitney Houston songs and shit. Toni Braxton and Boyz II Men, all these like sad love songs on it. And she like wrote the breakup CD and the guy's name. And then she drew all these like little broken hearts all over it. Like she used to get so involved in my cousin's relationship that it was like creepy, to the point where we thought maybe she had a thing for my cousin's boyfriend. It was very weird. It's so funny is my cousin's boyfriend, husband, did the tiles in my kitchen the year before. And he came over and he showed me this like fucking 10-page long email that my aunt sent him about, how he should be home after work and he should come pick the kids up right away. I mean, like, things that a wife would complain to a husband about. And, here she is telling my mom, oh, I wouldn't get involved. And my mom wasn't getting involved. My mom was just trying to say, hey, could you talk to your sister? That's all. My mom wasn't getting involved in their relationship at all. My mom might have commented on things like, hey, it's not healthy that your wife won't let you talk to your sister. But, come on. So my mom would go to her and she would constantly invalidate my mom and make my mom feel like she was shit. And she could deny it all she wants. I have all the messages. I had my mom's phone from the hospital and I opened up, her Facebook Messenger, which we'll talk about that later. But I opened up her Facebook Messenger and I saw all these arguments. They would have these arguments on the phone in the morning, right? And then, my mom would hang up on my aunt and then my mom would go back and feel bad. Meanwhile, my aunt's the one invalidating her and telling her she's wrong and all this other shit. Wrong for feeling the way she feels. When my brother's wife got pregnant, my aunt, again, was like, oh, Carol, she's pregnant. Like, all of a sudden, my brother's wife became the Virgin Mary. And we all had to treat her like she was a fucking Fabergé egg because she was pregnant. I'm sorry, her pregnancy didn't change the fact that she was an evil bitch. The baby didn't change it either because she got in a huge fight with my mom after the baby was born. So, my aunt would just constantly invalidate her and tell her these things. When we would say my mom was depressed, or my mom would say, she'd be like, just think positively, Carol. Like, if it was that easy, we wouldn't have like this $1 billion healthcare industry of psychiatrists and psychologists and Prozac and all this other shit. It's not that simple. She would just downplay it. And, I don't know if they were doing it to be abusive, but that's them. I hate to say it, but all my mom's sisters are like that. They have a tendency to invalidate you. They would say things like, don't worry about this, worry about that. Or don't focus on this, focus on that. Or stop worrying about that. Or you're taking it the wrong way. Or, they would make you feel like you were crazy. And I really started to feel like I was crazy. And at this point in time, I kind of started to realize that I wasn't crazy. I started to go online and read about these things, toxic families and scapegoating and all these other things. Do I think they were doing it to be abusive? No. I think it's a learned behavior. I think it's something that was done to them their whole lives. Again, they had to grow up in a home with an alcoholic father who was not home, who left them, and so they had to keep the smile on that they were this happy, perfect family. Meanwhile, my grandmother's dragging 6 kids with her to the supermarket on public transportation in Brooklyn because she doesn't have her driver's license because my grandfather wouldn't let her get it. So they had to put on this face that everything was perfect. It came into adulthood with them. And so they don't want to hear problems. They don't want to hear negativity. And so when you go to them, they have a tendency to invalidate you. I learned my lesson, and I feel like, this is part of me sharing this, is that I regret writing those letters. I really do. I wish I never wrote them. Not because of what I said. I don't really regret what I said. I regret the way I wrote it. I regret being so aggressive about it. I kind of picked my aunt's words, nitpicked her words for a reason, because that's what she did to me. And I wanted her to understand how ridiculous it was. I'm going to sit here and pick apart every little thing you say. How does it feel? That's exactly what she did to me. She just nitpicked at every little thing I said, and she twisted it. She twisted what I was saying into a whole different meaning and took it way out of context. I didn't talk to them after this. I gave them the ammunition to use against me when I wrote those letters. That was me giving them the ammunition. Here you go, shoot me. I had to learn with time not to do that. I had to learn with time not to take the bait, not to flip out, not to give them what they want. Because my aunt, she's very antagonistic. She fights with all of her friends, her daughter. She fights with everybody, my aunt. It's just how she is. She likes to argue with people. She's a high conflict personality, my Aunt Debbie. She likes to fight with people, and I see how she antagonizes people. And I wanted to shut it down. You're not going to keep antagonizing me. And I want to talk about this. This is another thing that my family constantly used. They used a lot of things to manipulate people. And one of the things is love. Love. And the other thing was my grandmother. And you'll see that in upcoming things that went on. They write this nasty letter and then they're like, I love you. So the I love you at the end is supposed to erase the fact that you just talk to me like I'm a fucking child, like I'm an idiot. And then they use my grandmother to manipulate a lot. If things aren't going their way, they'll always throw my grandmother out there and be like, well, how would this make Nana feel? And this is things that happen in unhealthy families like this. And it took me so long to realize it, because I always thought this was normal. I really did. They're very involved in each other's lives as adults, and that's not normal for grown adults to be this involved in each other's lives. Siblings. I look at my husband, who also comes from a big family. He's one of 4, and his brothers and sisters, they're not like this. They're not this involved in each other's lives in adulthood. So it's unhealthy. They're very codependent, and it's scary. And it's not normal. It's not healthy. I learned a lesson. I really wish I didn't write that, because I realized that it was a mistake. It was a mistake that I made. I should have just left it, alone. But I was so angry, and there was so much resentment building up at that point in time, that I felt like I just had no choice. And then, like I said, it was a mistake. And I learned from it. It took me a while, but eventually I learned, and I changed myself and how I dealt with them. I think that's an important part to point out here, because over time, I started to learn that this wasn't the way to deal with things. It didn't solve anything. So I had to learn a new way of dealing with them. And you guys will see as this story advances how I started to learn that. And again, it took me a lot of time to learn it, because while I was under such a great amount of stress, I wasn't thinking too clearly at this point in time. I hope you guys stick around, because the story from here on out just gets, this is like I don't know what you call it, climax, and then it just gets worse from here. It like plateaus, and then it just gets fucking worse, like way worse, like just unbelievable. So, I'll see you guys in the next one.